Hi, this is Regina White Favors with Overcoming Life Tired Setback. And so the topic today is you are not a rehabilitation center. This is largely dedicated to women, most importantly. Men can have this type of trait where they want to be everything to everybody, too. So I'm not negating their experiences. However, women tend to be the predominant gender who will rearrange, restructure, reorganize their whole lives around a particular person. It could be a family member, it can be a friendship, it could be a romantic partner, and become everything that that person needs in the woman, right? In other words, they will become a big mama. They will become a nana. They will become a single woman. They will do whatever they have to do to make life easy and make life work and make life functional for that person. So if you look at this from from the immediate family dynamic, a lot of times what you do as an adult has some sort of indication or implication from of how you were raised, how you were reared, how you were nurtured, the values that were imparted into you. So if your mother raised you as a mule, to be a mule, meaning that you were probably the eldest daughter, like myself. You were likely a latchkey kid if you are the oldest sibling, and you had to do everything. You had to cook and clean. You had to gather your siblings. You had to take care of your siblings while your parent was at work. And even when the parent came home, you're still cleaning the house. You're doing a lot of manual labor as a child. It's not, there's nothing wrong with chores per se, but a lot of times when there's a stress filled, toxic environment within the family dynamic, it moves from chores, everyday chores that you would be expected to complete, to sort of like slave like conditions. I'm not saying those conditions are bad in the sense that you're not truly a slave, right? But the way the parent was raised from his or her parent and the grandparent and the great grandparent um, uh, basically informs how that parent raises you. And then, of course, they loosen their grip later when you have kids or your kids have kids and they are a grandmother or great grandmother, because they learn differently. They learn as the generations come and life ages them, that they have a better understanding of what parenting really was supposed to be about. I still agree with spankings. I still agree. I don't necessarily agree with hardcore whippings that we used to get when we were children, but I do agree with some form of discipline, right? So if you are used to that and you have been exposed to that, and some harsh, some good, some productive, some teachable moments, then that's how you're going to engage the world. When it comes to you being in a romantic relationship, if you don't learn differently how to connect with a man from a romantic relational standpoint, viewpoint, instead connecting with him as if you're going to become his mother or function like a mother, then that's going to have negative implications for your relationship. And then you're just going to eventually move and transition into becoming a rehabilitation center for that person, because the man is then going to step into the role of a child and thinking like a child. And if the man does not, and at that point, he's not really a man, he's a male. He's part of the male gender. So he has not had any real understanding about what it means to be an adult, to take on adult responsibilities, to keep a job, to keep a place, to pay for that place on his own without help. Unless there are some life setback issues, like he lost his job or something. If he never left his mother's house or his father's house, that's a problem. And a lot of times you may have grown adults, I mean grown kids, move back in with their parents, and that could have been due to a divorce, that could be due to losing a job or something like that, but they still have a history of living apart from the parents. They know how to have their own place. They know how to pay for their own bills. They know how to run themselves as an adult. But when you don't have that in a partner and you move that partner into your house and you don't take inventory of who they are as a person, as people, you don't know, they never revealed to you that they've never had their own place. They never revealed to you that somebody else has always paid their bills. They've kept women on the equivalent of a dating rotation. And so they had one woman who paid for this, another woman paid for this, another woman paid for that, right? All of the women cooked and cleaned and gave him sex. And then he probably had a main person that he cared about more than all of the other women. And so basically he just put them in rotation. So when one doesn't want to do something, he'll get somebody else from the same rotation. If she doesn't want to do it, then he'll replace her. And so all of those women are replaceable. All of those women have a role to fulfill, and if they don't, he dismisses them. Okay, that's his mentality. That's his mentality. And now you're moving in, you're thinking that it's going to transition into a marriage, long term cohabitation situation. All you are end up doing, though, however, is becoming a rehabilitation center for him. So every time he needs something, he comes to you. Every time he's brokenhearted from one of the women he's been uh, uh, cheating on you with, you come back and you mend his wounds, right? You cook him dinner, you give him sex, you give him money, you let him drive your car. You do a number of things so that he can get whatever he needs to get from you, get well, for a time, and then turn around and go right back out to whoever keeps hurting him, whoever keeps hurting his heart, messing over him. A lot of times that's a Jezebel spirit, because sometimes the Jezebel spirit is the type of spirit that will say to the person, I can call you anytime I want to, and I know you'll come running. And so then if they are in that kind of mindset and in that kind of emotional and psychological triggered trauma, then it's going to affect how you deal with the person. It's going to, because then he may be triggering something in you from your own childhood. And here it is, you are codependent, trying to make this false relationship work, when in reality you're just being a mule for the person, and the person is just using you like a rehabilitation center. The person is just using you like a Walmart, a Burger King, or whatever, right? You're eventually, I mean, essentially you are a utility, not a relationship, not a partner, not a person that the person loves, right? And so when you're thinking about this and why you have gotten to the point of being life tired, the person that you're with now, you have attracted, and it's a toxic situation, you can pinpoint how many times you have dealt with the exact same person, but with a different face. The person you are dealing with now is just a different face, a different season in your life. But if you go back to your high school days, if actually go back to your family dynamic, you can see that person. That person could be in your mother. That person could be in your brother who always asks you for money. That person can be in your father who you could not depend upon. The person could be in the mother who was indifferent in terms of love towards you. The person could be in the environment from your family dynamic that was very toxic and hostile, right? And so if you chart, if you graph and link that person, your family dynamic, to the person that you might have dealt with in terms of a bully in elementary school, and then you went to high school and you had issues with the boyfriend who was cheating on you, and then you got to your early 20s and you moved in with somebody, and that that situation became kind of violent, or some form of domestic violence. And so you have all these different experiences, and the person that you're looking at now, 20 years later, 30 years later, or 40 years later, is really no different than the person you dealt with in your past. There's somebody that you dealt with in your past that you did not address, that's spirit that keeps following you. It could be a rejection spirit. It could be a fornication spirit. It can be an abandonment spirit. It can be a number of types of spirits that keep following you, and they are masquerading in individual people. If you have a friend, every time you turn around, you think you can depend upon that friend, but somehow that friend, somehow when you need help, you can't depend on that person. I remember a person when I was going to college, and she would call me all day, and was such a very nice person, very, very nice person. And but she would want to talk all day, right? And we're not talking about 30 minutes, an hour, or even 2 hours. We're talking about the whole cockamamie day. She wanted to take up so much of my time. And that began to bother me because a lot of times you get distracted with the conversation, especially if the person is a great communicator and you are engaging in communication on really popular topics or something like that, and you want to kind of stay engaged, but you don't realize that time has passed by. You should be doing your homework, or you should be cleaning your house, or you should be cooking a meal or something like that. Well, fast forward, I got into I talk about this on a previous audio. Um, I moved in with a friend girl. It was an unequally yoked situation. Um, and then it turned sour. And then I was able to get my apartment back, but it wasn't going to be available until about 2 days. So I ended up having to stay with one of the other friends we all used to know. She let me stay at her house for about a day or something like that. And then I was able to go and get my apartment back again. I moved everything in, etc. But I was in a research program, McNair Scholars Program, and I needed to, when I came back to town prior to getting my apartment, I needed about a couple of days to stay in somebody's house, in a friend's house, so that I could do the presentation and then I could get the rest of the money that was connected to the research project. So we got a certain amount of money per month for being McNair scholars, connected to going to classes, doing the research, etc. It was like a grant, a scholars program grant. But in order for you to get the remaining balance, you had to do the presentation. That balance was very, very high. So what I needed was, I told her that I would give her a certain amount of money um, um, to stay at her house. I just needed that night. I just needed that night. She refused. She talked to her sisters and she refused. And so that left a bad taste in my mouth. But I had to get over it. I found another friend who I used to know in college, and she let me stay, and I gave her some money, and then that was it. So I was good for the money. And then when I returned and everything came back to normal, me back in my place, she wanted to return to a friendship um, in the same way that it was before, where she took up a great deal of my time. The problem with that situation is that I was partly her rehabilitation center when she wanted to talk like she wanted to talk for for hours. When I needed help, and my situation was actually really dire. When I needed help, I couldn't depend upon her. And I learned a valuable lesson, and I didn't learn this lesson about being a rehabilitation center until really now, within the last few years. But I learned a valuable lesson not to give over all your time and your mind and your heart to people. There's nothing wrong with being there, and she had every right to reject um, my request, right? But if I was there for you, and no, you should not always accept a reciprocal. Um, you should not always accept for somebody to uh, do for you just because you did for them. But relationships cannot be one sided forever. They cannot be one sided perpetually. And so the fact that she was not there for me in a dire situation, not this was not a crying wolf situation. It was truly a dire situation. We ended up having I ended up having to let that relationship go because I was an emotional rehabilitation center for her, but when I needed a physical quote basically rehabilitation center. I just needed to stay on the couch for one night so I can go do the presentation, and I would have I was gonna cash the check and give her the money. It's the exact same thing that I did with the person who actually opened her doors. And so that's something that I want you to think about, because as much as we always accept our relationships to be reciprocal on some level, there's always inherent some expectation that if I come pick you up at your job uh, because you missed the bus, and here it is, all of the buses have stopped, and you called me because I have a car and I come pick you up. I'm not saying that I'm going to create a situation where I'm going to test whether or not you're going to be reciprocal, but I would expect that if I don't always ask you for stuff, if I don't always if I'm not the type of person who's always asking you or testing you, testing the endurance of our friendship or relationship, that when I do get into a need, and if I'm asking you, that's very big of, that's hard for me to do, to ask you for help. If I'm asking you for help, then that lets you know that that's a true um, um, request for help. So then, when you know that people do not always apply a reciprocity or a reciprocal attitude towards you, it's time to really set boundaries with people. So instead of being the person who volunteers your time to go do something, understand that that person is grown. And a lot of times, the people who are asking you to do something for them are usually people who have cars, who a lot of times they are near the very thing that they're asking you to do or to go over. I remember a time when I was in school, and there was this girl who would always ask me about particular whatever it was, right? And I was riding the bus, and she had a car, and so she said, "Yeah, can you stop by there and go get this, whatever the thing was at that time?" And so, like a dummy, I would say, well, it's on my way. And so I kind of stop by there all the time. So yeah, I can go by there. It's not that big of a deal. Well, it actually was a big of a deal, because once you're on the bus and you're going home, you want to go home. You don't want to get off the bus unless you truly have to get off the bus. And so when I realized, I got the revelation that this person who is asking me to do something for her, to inconvenience myself, my life, my body, my time, after I've had a long day in classes or teaching or anything like that. This person who is asking me to do this is a person who has a car. And when I realized that the person was using me and that I was using me to people please the person, I had to change my life view. I had to change my life strategy, how I did things. So then I began to set boundaries with the person and say, that office is open between 8:30 and 5. You are usually done with your own classes by 12, so you have a car. You can just swing by there and pick it up. And then she would say something like, "Yeah, but it's not on my way. I mean, it would be out of my way." Well, me getting off the bus is completely out of my way. That's going to be completely out of my way. So the more I started to reinforce this idea that you need to do it for yourself, this is not an emergency situation. This is a dire situation. This is not a dire situation. Then, if it's not that, then you need to take your grown self in your grown car over there and do it yourself. There is a exception to a rule. I remember a friend, she was a friend of the other friend that I had, who I ended up having to lose a relationship with. Well, she didn't have a babysitter. She had a baby in college, and she didn't have a babysitter. And so she had to take a test that was a final test for graduation. So she asked me to keep the baby. Okay. Well, that's a more emergency based situation. If she can't take that test, she can't graduate. She can't graduate. She can't get a job. She can't get a job. Right. She can't take care of her child. That's a different type of situation. But even in that situation, when I look back on that, in some ways she was using me as a rehabilitation center, because she couldn't call on the father. What was the father? The friend that I was living with, who she was actually friends with, she couldn't depend on her. She didn't have the money to put the child in um, a daycare situation. And all of the people that she favored as friends, she couldn't depend upon them. But she called upon me uh, to be of service to her. Later, when the situation with the friend went south, she too started to act silly towards me. So I thought it was so interesting. You couldn't get anybody else's help. You could not get anybody else's help but my own. But at the end, you still ended up mistreating me because you were trying to impress your friend and support your friend. And I learned a valuable lesson. Don't volunteer your time, of course, but don't be everything that you need to be to somebody. Uh, do look at do look at situations whether or not they are truly emergency based, and if they're not, they need to find another option. You cannot be a rehabilitation center for people because no matter what, a lot of times when people are using you like that, they are really hostile towards you and they don't really like you. They don't respect you. They don't like you. And they feel offended that they have to actually ask you for help. And so then once they will humble themselves in that moment and get the help. But then once they get the help and they get better on their feet, they start acting stupid towards you. That messes with your heart and your mind. That messes with your finances. She never even paid me, and I never even required her to pay me. And so that's another issue, that if you're going to do anything for anybody, you need to set boundaries in terms of finances. You want me to take my time. If you had to go and pay somebody else, if you had to go and use somebody else, you would have to pay them. And so it's the same conversation that many parents are having today about their mothers and fathers who are the grandparents of the kids, don't want to keep the kids without some kind of payment. If the parent had to take the child to the daycare, they would have to pay in excess of hundreds of dollars a month. So then why don't you give that to the grandparent? But they don't think that the grandparents should charge them anything. That's one. And they don't think that they think the grandparents should want to keep their grandkids. Sure, grandparents want to keep their grandkids, but on their own time. Grandparents have right to be able to live their life. They've already taken care of their kids. They're one, two, three, four, five kids. So now you want your mother or your father to now take care of your kids? No, that's not fair. You had those kids, you need to take care of those kids. That's it. If it is a dire situation, an emergency based situation, uh, that you that is just what it is. If you got to go for an interview, a job interview, or something like that, that's just what it is. Okay, then we look at that situation by situation, and maybe I can be of help to you, but in a season. I'm not looking for you to come back and live off of me forever, and eat up all the food in the house and run up all the light bill, electric bill, and hardly pay any rent when you got money. You can't do that. You cannot use me as a rehabilitation center. And that's what a lot of people are doing. So as you go over your life and you start to chart some of these patterns and behaviors that you have a strong commitment to, but that are also breaking you down and contributing to your self-destruction, as you do that, I want you to think about yourself as moving you out of this mindset of being a rehabilitation center. Women who take in men just out of prison, you are operating like a rehabilitation center. Let that man go to the halfway house. Let the resources, the people who are trained to help that person at the halfway house or at the shelter or wherever, let them help your man. Because he hasn't proven himself. He doesn't know what he wants. And all he's going to do, because he doesn't have any skills, he done been in prison for so long. He's already insecure about that. You're paying all the bills. So now he's, for ego reasons, is going to look for another woman that he can be a man with. And so here it is. He's living in your house and you are rehabilitating him, but you're only rehabilitating him in terms of him being able to have the capacity to now be with somebody else. It's the equivalent of being a come up woman, that they'll use you, your body, your resources, your mind, your heart, your finances to get themselves well, to get themselves well, only to then leave you and go with a woman and marry a woman too who did nothing for them. So I want you to think about that. Really, really think about that, because going forward, you can't afford to be a rehabilitation center in your 40s and your 50s and your 60s. Your time is too short for that. You can have a heart attack dealing with fools. You'll lose all your money. Your money will burn in your pockets dealing with fools. And so that's not something that you want for yourself. So this is Overcoming Life Tired Setback. You are not a rehabilitation center. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, visit reginawhitefavorites.com for tips and resources. Thank you very much for listening.